As a runner, we want a strong and stable hip, and the gluteus medius is one of those muscles that we have to strengthen and stabilize in order to prevent hip drop, which means one hip is dropping when we're running, or our knee caving in, which is just gonna throw off the rest of our lower extremity chain. In the last video, I showed you how you can strengthen and stabilize your hip, and in this video, I'm gonna show you how you can test the strength of your gluteus medius, specifically into that hip abduction strength. Research has shown that if we can strengthen the hip into hip abduction, it can help prevent running injuries, overuse injuries. So today we're gonna go through the forward step down test. It's a test that you can do. I do recommend you either do it in front of a mirror or you record yourself doing it, and then you're able to compare how your form looks compared to how it looks while I walk you through exactly what you should be looking for. All you need here is a stair step or a block that's about 4 to 6 inches. I'm gonna be using some books that I found around the house just to show you how easy this is to test your strength. So if my left leg is on the block and then my right leg is doing the lowering, that means I'm testing the strength of my left hip and my left gluteus medius. So all I'm gonna do, either look in the mirror or record yourself, all I'm gonna do is put my hands on my hips, tap down, and come back up. So I'm trying to tap my opposite leg, in this case the right leg. I'm tapping the right heel down in front and coming back up. What I'm not doing is stepping all the way down and transferring my weight onto this front leg and then coming back up. Okay, so it's just a tap and back up. I'll do this a couple times, either in front of a mirror, looking at my form, or recording myself. Let's go over how you can check your strength now and how you can score how you did with this test. Starting from the top of the body, so we're looking at trunk position, specifically your pelvis. With your hands on your pelvis, is one hand or one side of your pelvis dipping or dropping as you are tapping that heel down like this? And that's why I like to have the hands on the pelvis, just to make it easier for you to see. So if I'm level here, my pelvis is level, and then I'm dropping down, that's a good indication that we need to strengthen our core, our trunk, and our pelvic stability. So we're not dipping a shoulder down, dropping your pelvis down, because if we're doing that when we're doing this test, we are most likely dropping our pelvis and our hip when we are running, and we don't want to do that. So that is one thing that you can look at, one thing to make note of that you need to strengthen. The other thing to look at with the pelvic positioning is the rotation of it. So if my hands are on my pelvis, and you can pretend like the front of my hip bone, front of my pelvic bones, I have 2 flashlights that are flashing straight ahead. Am I rotating my pelvis to drop that heel down? Am I rotating it, or are the flashlights staying facing straight ahead? So we're looking at pelvic rotation. You know, sometimes we'll rotate just to get down into that further range of motion as a compensatory pattern. So you just want to make sure your pelvis is staying straight ahead as you drop that heel down. We'll also do this a lot with unilateral exercises, like in a plank position. You might notice rotation of the pelvis. So don't think this is only for those single leg exercises. It can also be done as a compensatory pattern with a lot of core work, especially if you're weaker. So if that's the case, just make sure you're modifying it and you're really focusing on quality of movement, keeping your pelvis staying straight ahead. So you're not working on rotation of the pelvis. The pelvis does rotate when we run, but it only rotates so much. We don't want to dip into this compensatory pattern of too much rotation. It's like just enough rotation, just a little bit of rotation, because our hip is moving forward and backwards. But in this case, our hip's not moving forward and backwards. So we just want to make sure that that pelvis is staying facing straight ahead, and it's also staying level as you drop down and up. Moving down the chain, the next thing we're looking at is our knee stability. Is our knee staying in line with our second and third toe, or is our knee caving in, or is it wobbling as you're coming down? If that's the case, we really need to strengthen into that hip abduction moment of the gluteus medius. So just see, what is your knee doing? Or is your knee completely caving in? Just note these things. If it's wobbling, if it's caving in, if it's basically not staying tracked over the second toe, it's a good sign we need to strengthen into that hip abduction. The last thing we're really looking at is what's happening at the foot and ankle in terms of your balance and your knee translating over your toes. So this test does also look at ankle mobility, specifically into dorsiflexion, which means that our knee is translating over our ankle, over our toes into dorsiflexion, just like it does when we are running and about to push off the ground. So in terms of your balance though, so one thing is just to make sure that your knee is translating over your toes as you load your quad and glute. The other thing to look at is your balance. Are you falling over as you are trying to tap your toe or tap your heel? Are you hanging out on the outside of your foot? Is your ankle completely going into this self-correction where it's just not stable? So checking out your balance. If that's the case, we might need to work a little bit more on balance, specifically that tripod stance, which means that you're working through stabilizing in single leg with your big toe, your ball of your foot on the outside of your foot, like your fifth metatarsal, and then your heel. So if you can imagine, that makes a tripod stance. So you're really focusing on pushing your big toe down into the ground, pushing through the ball of the foot on the outside of your foot, and then also through your heel with equal pressure. Tapping down and up. And really the important thing to note about this test, you're just noting what do I need to work on in order to become a stronger runner, in order to prevent injuries. This is a test to just bring some insight into what else you need to focus on. Now, if you are noticing a bunch of different things going on, you're noticing some imbalances, some compensatory patterns, I do recommend you go through the Runners Complete program. It's a 12-week strength, stability, mobility, and power program designed for runners. So it's going to address all of your imbalances with running specific movement patterns, because if we can learn to move better, we can learn to run better, run stronger, and prevent those injuries. So it's a win-win, and I will link that program below. If you haven't already gone through the video to help you stabilize your hip into all 6 movement patterns, all the motions that the hip has to offer, I'll put that video right here so you can check it out, and I'll see you in the next video.